And one of the fronts upon which that battle is being fought is the ESG movement. And so do you want to walk through that for everyone, just to bring them up to date?
Absolutely. I mean, this has been something of my obsession over the last several years, and not just as a commentator, but as a doer and as an entrepreneur too. So the issue with the ESG movement, it stands for environmental, social, and governance factors. It's designed to sound boring for a reason. My general rule of thumb is, if it sounds like a 3-letter acronym that bores you, that's a good sign that you should be paying more attention, because it was designed to bore you. What this whole game is about is using private power, using capital markets to accomplish through the back door what government could not get done through the front door under the Constitution. So I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll walk through the history of how we got there, because that's also pretty important too. What the essence of the ESG movement is, what it does is it uses the money of everyday citizens, Americans, but Canadians too, Australians and Western Europeans. It uses the money of everyday citizens to invest in companies and to vote their shares in ways that advance one-sided progressive agendas, environmental and social agendas, that most of those people do not agree with, that most of those people did not know were actually being advanced with their own money, and which don't advance the financial best interests of most people whose money is actually used. So what does that mean? Think about yourself saving in a retirement account or a 401k account or a brokerage account. You think that the person who's managing that money is exclusively looking after your best financial interests. It turns out they're not. They're also looking after advancing these other environmental and social goals. Who are these institutions? They're asset management firms like BlackRock or State Street or Vanguard or Invesco or countless others that have signed a pledge to say that they're going to align all of their underlying companies with the goals of the Paris Climate Accords, with net zero standards by 2050, with modern diversity, equity, and inclusion standards. And those 3 or 4 firms alone manage about $20 trillion, maybe even a little bit more. That's more than the US GDP right now in the hands of 3 to 4 financial institutions. But they're not using their money to do it. They're using the money of probably most listeners to this exchange right now, people watching this. Good chances that their money, their retirement accounts, their brokerage accounts are being used to tell companies like Apple to adopt racial equity audits that Apple's board initially did not want to adopt. To tell companies like Chevron to adopt Scope 3 emissions caps, which I can talk about what that means, but that Chevron did not want to adopt, and that most people watching this probably didn't want to force on Chevron either, but their money was used to do it anyway. That's what this ESG movement is all about. So how did we get here is actually a really important question. And a lot of this began, there were 2 big milestones seeing the supercharging of this ESG movement in our economy and in capital markets. The first one, which I think of as the Big Bang, that really set the whole thing, for all intents and purposes, into motion, was the 2008 financial crisis. What happened in the 2008 financial crisis, and by the way, I had a front row seat to this. I got my first job in New York at an elite hedge fund in the fall of 2007. The fund I worked at got an honorable mention in Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short. This is my first job out of college. So this is fun stuff for me, right? A lot of people lost a lot of money on Wall Street. I didn't have any money, so it didn't matter to me. It was more of a learning experience, which was a pretty rich one. But I had a front row seat. What happened was, in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, Republicans, it's worth remembering this, Republicans in this country bailed out the big banks, which I don't know what your view is, Dr. Peterson. I view that as a major mistake. It's a cardinal sin. The Bush administration and Hank Paulson, a CEO, an alumnus of Goldman Sachs, used public taxpayer funds to bail out Goldman Sachs while letting his competitors fail. This was crony capitalism all the way down. And the left actually had a point in this country. Occupy Wall Street was born. And what they said is, look, if you're going to play that crony capitalist game, then you know what? We're going to play our game. We're just going to take money from your wealthy corporate fat cat pockets and redistribute it to poor people to help poor people, because that's what we on the far left want to do on the Occupy Wall Street movement. But right around that time, there was a fissure in the left-wing movement in this country where there was the birth of this new, let's call it the woke left. Barack Obama had just been elected the first black president of the United States. There was a lot of cultural currents in the US that said, well, wait a minute there. The real problem isn't quite economic injustice or poverty. It's really racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry, and by the way, climate change. This is post Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. This actually presented the opportunity of a generation for Wall Street to say that, no, okay, guys, we'll make a deal with you. We will use our corporate power, use our money, really your money, to applaud diversity and inclusion, to put token minorities on corporate boards, to muse about this racially disparate impact of climate change from the mountaintops of Davos after flying there in a private jet. We'll do all of these things, but we don't do it for free. We expect the new left to look the other way when it comes to leaving our corporate power intact. And so they defanged Occupy Wall Street. Most people don't even remember what Occupy Wall Street is. It went by the wayside. And that's how the birth of this new, what I've sometimes called woke industrial or ESG industrial complex was born, where Wall Street said that, you know what, if you can't beat us, join us. And that's exactly what happened.